Good evening and welcome to Myths for Sleep. I'm James, and tonight we'll journey into Greek mythology with the timeless love story of Orpheus and Eurydice. Discover how the divine musician's song could move mountains and tame wild beasts, and follow his heartbreaking quest through the underworld to reclaim his beloved. If this story guides you to peaceful sleep, please like this video and leave a comment telling me which mythological tale you'd love to hear next. Your support helps me create more soothing stories for your restful nights. Settle in comfortably and let yourself be carried away by this eternal tale of love and music. In the ancient world, where gods walked among mortals and music held the power to move mountains, there lived a young man whose name would echo through eternity. Orpheus was born under a blessed star, son of Apollo, the radiant god of music and poetry, and Calliope, the most beautiful of the 9 muses who inspired all artistic creation. From his earliest breath, Orpheus was destined for greatness. His father Apollo, recognizing the divine spark within his child, placed a lyre in the infant's tiny hands. This was no ordinary instrument, but one crafted by Hermes himself, its strings woven from the light of stars, and its frame carved from the sacred laurel tree that grew on Mount Parnassus. As Orpheus grew, so did his extraordinary gift. When he first drew his fingers across the golden strings, the very air seemed to shimmer with possibility. The melody that emerged was unlike anything the world had ever heard. It carried within it the whisper of wind through ancient forests, the gentle murmur of streams finding their way to the sea, and the profound silence that exists between heartbeats. The power of Orpheus's music was beyond mortal comprehension. When he played, wild beasts would abandon their hunt and lie down peacefully at his feet. Lions would purr like gentle cats, and wolves would lower their heads in reverence. The trees themselves would uproot and walk closer to hear his melodies, their branches swaying in perfect harmony with his rhythm. Even the stones were not immune to his charm. Great boulders would roll down mountainsides, not in destructive avalanches, but in graceful processions, arranging themselves into natural amphitheaters where they could better listen to the divine music. Rivers would slow their courses, their waters forming pools of perfect stillness to serve as mirrors for the beauty of his songs. But perhaps most remarkably, Orpheus's music could touch the human soul in ways that defied explanation. Warriors would lay down their weapons and weep at the beauty of his melodies. Lovers separated by great distances would feel their hearts drawn together across impossible spans. The sick would find comfort in his gentle tunes, and the dying would pass peacefully into whatever realm awaited them beyond. As word of his gift spread throughout the ancient world, people would travel for months just to hear him play. They came from the furthest reaches of the known world, crossing treacherous seas and scaling impossible mountains. And none who heard him ever left unchanged. Yet for all his divine heritage and miraculous abilities, Orpheus remained humble and kind. He understood that his gift was not truly his own, but something that flowed through him from the eternal wellspring of beauty that exists at the heart of all creation. He was merely a vessel, a conduit through which the music of the spheres could reach mortal ears. In quiet moments, when he sat alone beneath the star-filled sky, Orpheus would contemplate the nature of his calling. He understood that music was more than mere entertainment or even art. It was a bridge between worlds, a language that could speak directly to the soul without need for words. Through his lyre, he could express truths too profound for ordinary speech, emotions too deep for common understanding. This gift, however, came with its own burden. For one who could move the hearts of all who heard him, Orpheus himself remained strangely untouched by deep personal connection. He had admirers beyond counting, followers who would have done anything for him, but he had never known the profound intimacy of true love. It was on a morning when spring was painting the world in shades of new green that Orpheus first saw her. He had been walking through a meadow carpeted with wildflowers, his lyre silent at his side for once, simply enjoying the symphony of birdsong and buzzing bees that nature provided without his intervention. She emerged from a grove of silver birch trees like a vision from a dream. Eurydice, daughter of the river god, moved with the fluid grace of water itself. Her hair caught the morning sunlight and seemed to flow like liquid gold around her shoulders. Her eyes held the depth of forest pools, reflecting not just light, but something deeper, more eternal. For the first time in his life, Orpheus found himself speechless. The man who could charm stones and tame wild beasts with his voice stood frozen, watching as this extraordinary being gathered flowers with movements so graceful they seemed choreographed by the gods themselves. Eurydice noticed him standing there and smiled. It was a smile that seemed to contain all the warmth of summer, all the promise of spring, and all the peaceful contentment of autumn evenings. "You must be Orpheus," she said, her voice like music itself. "I have heard of your gift from the wind in the trees and the songs of the streams." When Orpheus finally found his voice, it trembled slightly, an imperfection that would have amazed anyone who knew him. "And you are more beautiful than any melody I have ever created," he replied, the words coming from somewhere deeper than conscious thought. They spent that entire day together, walking through meadows and forests, talking of everything and nothing. Orpheus discovered that Eurydice possessed a different kind of magic. Where his gift allowed him to move others, hers was the ability to create perfect stillness, moments of such peace and clarity that the soul could rest completely. When evening came, Orpheus took up his lyre and played for her. But this was unlike any music he had ever created before. This song did not call to wild beasts or move mountains. Instead, it spoke of gentle things, the way sunlight filtered through leaves, the sound of rain on a quiet pond, the feeling of complete safety and belonging. Eurydice listened with tears streaming down her face, not from sadness but from the overwhelming beauty of hearing love given voice. "No one has ever sung my heart's song back to me," she whispered when the last note faded into the evening air. From that moment, they were inseparable. Day after day, they explored the world together, discovering in each other a completeness they had never known they were missing. Orpheus would play, and Eurydice would dance, her movements translating his melodies into physical poetry. The natural world seemed to celebrate their union. Flowers bloomed more vibrantly where they walked. Birds sang more sweetly when they passed. Even the weather seemed to arrange itself around their happiness, providing gentle breezes when they needed cooling and warm sunshine when they sought comfort. Their love became legendary throughout the ancient world. Poets would speak of it in hushed, reverent tones. Lovers would pray to the gods to bless them with even a fraction of what Orpheus and Eurydice shared. Theirs was a love that seemed to prove that the universe itself was fundamentally benevolent, that harmony and beauty were the natural order of things. Months passed like days, each one filled with wonder and discovery. They learned the secret languages that only lovers know, the meaning behind a glance, the communication possible in silence, the way two souls can share a single thought. Orpheus's music reached new heights of beauty, inspired by the love that filled his heart. As their first anniversary approached, Orpheus knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend eternity with this remarkable woman. He composed a special song, one that spoke not of passion's fire, but of love's deep peace. The kind of love that grows stronger with time, rather than burning itself out in intensity. The decision to marry felt as natural and inevitable as the sunrise. When Orpheus asked for her hand, Eurydice's acceptance came not in words, but in the radiant smile that lit her entire being. They both understood that this was not just a promise between two mortals, but a sacred vow witnessed by all of creation. The wedding day dawned with unprecedented beauty. The sky wore robes of the palest blue, decorated with clouds like wisps of fine silk. The sun seemed to shine with particular warmth, as if Apollo himself was blessing his son's union. Every flower in the meadow had bloomed simultaneously, creating a carpet of color that stretched beyond the horizon. Guests came from every corner of the world, both mortal and divine. The 9 muses, Orpheus's aunts, arrived in procession, each contributing their own gift to the celebration. Calliope, his mother, wept tears of joy that crystallized into pearls as they fell. Apollo himself appeared in human form, his divine radiance dimmed just enough not to blind the mortal guests. Eurydice appeared at the appointed hour, dressed in robes that seemed woven from moonbeams and morning dew. A crown of flowers adorned her head, each bloom chosen for its symbolic meaning. Roses for love, lilies for purity, and olive branches for peace. As she walked toward Orpheus, every step seemed to make the earth itself more beautiful. The ceremony took place in a natural amphitheater formed by ancient oak trees, their branches intertwining overhead to create a living cathedral. When the time came for vows, Orpheus set aside his lyre and spoke from his heart. His words were simple but carried the power of absolute truth. I promise to love you beyond time, beyond death, beyond any force that might try to separate us. Eurydice's response was equally profound in its simplicity. My heart beats in rhythm with yours, she said. And even if that rhythm should stop, the love will continue. Her words proved more prophetic than anyone could have imagined. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Orpheus played music that seemed to come directly from the realm of the gods, melodies so beautiful that they lingered in the air long after the notes had been struck. Eurydice danced as if gravity held no power over her, her movements translating the music into visual poetry. All of nature participated in the festivities. Gentle animals emerged from the forest to witness the joy, sitting peacefully beside their natural predators. The trees swayed in perfect time with the music, their leaves rustling harmoniously. Even the stones seemed to pulse with life and celebration. As evening approached, the couple prepared to retire to their new home, a cottage nestled in a grove where a freshwater spring bubbled up from deep in the earth. But first, tradition demanded a final celebration walk through the meadows where they had first met. The wedding party formed a joyous procession, with torches lighting their way as twilight deepened into night. Orpheus and Eurydice walked hand in hand, surrounded by the laughter and songs of their guests. The very air seemed alive with happiness and promise. But in the shadows at the edge of the meadow, another figure watched the celebration with very different emotions. Aristeus, a minor god known for his pursuit of honey and hunting, had long desired Eurydice for himself. Her marriage to Orpheus filled him with a jealousy that burned like acid in his divine heart. As the procession moved through the moonlit meadow, Aristeus followed at a distance, his mind churning with dark thoughts. He had been rejected by Eurydice many times, but her gentle refusals had only inflamed his desire. Now, seeing her radiant with happiness in another's arms, his jealousy transformed into something more dangerous, the desire for possession at any cost. The wedding party began to disperse as couples and families made their way home, calling out final blessings and promises to visit soon. Orpheus and Eurydice found themselves walking alone through a section of meadow bordered by tall grass and wildflowers. The moon painted everything in silver, and the night air carried the scent of jasmine and night-blooming cereus. It was then that Aristeus made his move. Stepping out from his hiding place among the tall grasses, he blocked their path. His divine form flickered between human appearance and something more primal and threatening. "Eurydice," he called, his voice carrying an undertone of command that spoke to his godly nature. "You have made a mistake. You belong with one of divine blood, not this half-mortal musician." Orpheus stepped protectively in front of his new wife, his hand instinctively reaching for his lyre. But Eurydice, gentle as she was, possessed a core of steel when it came to matters of principle. "I have chosen my path, Aristeus," she said clearly. "I choose love freely given over power demanded." The rejection, coming on this night of all nights, proved too much for the jealous god to bear. In that moment, something snapped within him, and he lunged forward with inhuman speed. Eurydice's instincts, honed by her connection to the natural world, sensed the danger before her conscious mind could process it. As Aristeus lunged toward her, she spun away from his grasping hands and ran into the tall grass, her white wedding robes flowing behind her like wings in the moonlight. The meadow that had been so peaceful moments before now seemed transformed into a maze of shadows and hidden dangers. Eurydice ran with the desperate speed of a doe fleeing a hunter, her bare feet silent on the soft earth. Behind her, she could hear Aristeus crashing through the grass, his divine strength allowing him to move with terrifying speed. Orpheus gave chase as well, calling his wife's name, his lyre clutched in his hand but useless against this supernatural threat. The peaceful wedding night had become a nightmare of pursuit and terror, the silver moonlight now seeming cold and hostile rather than romantic. In her panic, Eurydice failed to notice the ancient warning signs that nature had placed in her path. The sudden stillness in the grass ahead should have alerted her to danger. The way the night insects fell silent should have made her pause. But fear drove her forward, and she stumbled directly into the domain of something far older and more dangerous than even a jealous god. The serpent that lay coiled in the grass was no ordinary creature. It was one of the ancient guardians of the earth, a being that existed from the time when the world was young and wild magic flowed freely through all living things. Disturbed from its slumber by the commotion, it reacted with the swift, merciless efficiency that had kept it alive for countless centuries. The strike came without warning. One moment Eurydice was running, her heart pounding with fear but still beating with life and hope. The next, she felt the burning pain of fangs piercing her ankle, followed immediately by a cold numbness that began to spread up her leg. She stumbled and fell, her wedding dress torn by thorns and stained with earth. The serpent, having delivered its venomous warning, slithered away into the darkness, leaving behind only the scent of ancient earth and the terrible knowledge of what had been done. Orpheus reached her first, dropping to his knees beside her fallen form. In the moonlight, he could see the twin puncture wounds on her ankle, already beginning to swell and darken. But worse than the physical signs of the bite was the change he could see in her eyes. The way the vital spark that made her uniquely Eurydice was beginning to dim. "My love," she whispered, her voice already growing faint. "I can feel it spreading. The cold is reaching my heart." She lifted her hand to touch his face, and he was shocked by how rapidly her skin was losing its warmth. Aristeus arrived moments later, his rage instantly transforming into horror when he saw what his pursuit had caused. "I never meant for this," he said, his divine voice broken with genuine remorse. "I only wanted to speak with her, to make her understand." But Orpheus had no attention to spare for the god's regrets. All his focus was on Eurydice, on trying to pour his own life force into her failing body through the power of his touch and his desperate words of love. "Stay with me," he pleaded. "Don't leave me. We've only just begun our life together." Eurydice smiled with tremendous effort, the expression a ghost of her former radiance. "My beloved," she whispered, "this is not the end of our story. Love like ours cannot be destroyed by death. Find me wherever I go. Promise me you will find me." The venom worked with ruthless efficiency, shutting down her mortal body system by system. But even as her physical form grew cold and still, something essential about her seemed to linger, as if her spirit was reluctant to leave the world where she had known such perfect love. Orpheus held her lifeless body against his chest, his tears falling like rain onto her pale face. The man who had never known true sorrow was now experiencing grief in its purest, most devastating form. The pain was so complete, so overwhelming, that it seemed to hollow out his very soul. In his anguish, he began to play his lyre, not consciously choosing the melody, but simply allowing his grief to flow through the strings. The music that emerged was unlike anything he had ever created before. It spoke of love cut short, of promises broken not by choice but by cruel fate, of a heart that had found its perfect match only to have it torn away. The song was so filled with raw emotion that it seemed to affect the very fabric of reality. The grass around them began to wither, the flowers to close their petals in sympathy. Even the moon seemed to dim, as if all of nature was mourning alongside the heartbroken musician. For 7 days and 7 nights, Orpheus remained in that meadow, holding Eurydice's body and playing songs of such profound grief that they changed the very nature of the place. The grass around them turned silver with his tears, and the flowers became pale as moonlight. Wild animals came from miles around, drawn by the music, but too overcome with sorrow to make any sound. On the 8th day, as dawn broke grey and cold, Orpheus finally understood what he must do. Eurydice's final words echoed in his memory. "Find me, wherever I go." If she had passed into the realm of the dead, then that is where he would follow. No mortal had ever returned from Hades' kingdom, but then again, no mortal had ever possessed the gift that flowed through Orpheus's lyre. He tenderly laid Eurydice's body in a grove of silver birch trees, the same trees from which he had first emerged to enter his life. The dryads who lived within the trees whispered promises to guard her form until his return, their voices rustling through the leaves like gentle prayers. The entrance to the underworld lay far to the west, beyond mountains that scraped the sky and deserts that stretched to the horizon. Orpheus began his journey with nothing but his lyre and a heart full of desperate determination. As he walked, he played softly, and the music seemed to smooth his path, causing rivers to grow shallow where he needed to cross and mountain passes to reveal themselves when all seemed impassable. The journey took many weeks, through landscapes that grew increasingly strange and otherworldly. The sun seemed to shine less brightly the further west he traveled, and the very air grew thick with the weight of approaching mystery. Finally, he reached the banks of the river Styx, where the ferryman Charon waited with his ancient boat. Charon was a figure to inspire fear in the bravest souls. His skin was grey as ash, his eyes like deep pools of shadow, and his voice carried the sound of wind through empty spaces. "No living soul may cross these waters," he declared when Orpheus approached. "Turn back while you still can, musician." But Orpheus had not come this far to be turned away by threats or tradition. He lifted his lyre and began to play a song that spoke of love's eternal nature, of bonds that death could not sever, of the courage required to venture into unknown realms for the sake of another's soul. As the melody flowed across the dark waters, something extraordinary happened. Tears began to fall from Charon's ancient eyes, the first he had shed in countless millennia of ferrying souls between the worlds of the living and the dead. "In all my ages," he whispered, "I have never heard such music. Enter my boat, Orpheus. I will carry you across, though it may cost me dearly." The journey across the Styx was silent, except for the gentle splash of Charon's oars and the occasional distant wail of spirits lost in the misty waters. Orpheus sat in the bow of the boat, his lyre across his knees, watching as the shores of the living world disappeared forever behind him. On the far shore waited Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the gates of Hades. Each head was the size of a boulder, with teeth like daggers and eyes that burned like coals. The beast had never allowed any living soul to pass, and its growl was like the sound of avalanches and earthquakes combined. Orpheus approached without fear, knowing that fear would only strengthen the creature's resolve to bar his way. Instead, he played a lullaby, soft and gentle, the kind of song a mother might sing to comfort a frightened child. The three heads stopped their growling and began to listen, tilting to better catch the melody. Slowly, incredibly, the massive beast began to relax. First one head, then another, then the third, lowered to rest on enormous paws. The eyes that had burned with hellfire began to close, and soon the guardian of the underworld was sleeping peacefully, won over by the power of compassionate music. Beyond Cerberus lay the realm of Hades itself, a vast landscape of shadows and whispers. Here dwelt the spirits of all who had died, wandering in forms that were neither fully solid nor completely ethereal. They drifted through the eternal twilight like leaves on an invisible wind, their faces bearing expressions of infinite sadness and resignation. As Orpheus walked among them, playing softly, the spirits began to gather around him. For the first time since their deaths, they were hearing music that reminded them of life, of joy, of all the beauty they had left behind. Some began to weep, others to smile, and all seemed to stand a little straighter, as if remembering what it felt like to be truly alive. At the heart of the underworld stood a palace built from obsidian and shadow, its towers reaching up into the eternal darkness above. This was the throne room of Hades, Lord of the Dead, and his queen Persephone, she who ruled over both death and the promise of spring's return. No living soul had ever stood before their thrones, and the very air around the palace thrummed with power older than memory. As Orpheus approached the great doors, carved with scenes of mortality and transformation, they swung open without sound. Inside, the throne room stretched vast and terrible, lit by torches that burned with cold, blue flame. The walls were lined with the Furies, the judges of the dead, and countless other powers who served the realm of shadows. At the far end of the hall, on thrones carved from single blocks of midnight dark stone, sat the rulers of this domain. Hades appeared as a figure of terrible majesty, neither young nor old, his presence commanding absolute attention and respect. Beside him, Persephone maintained the delicate balance between beauty and otherworldliness that marked her dual nature as both queen of death and herald of life's renewal. The assembled powers of the underworld watched in silence as Orpheus walked the length of the hall, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. When he reached the foot of the thrones, he knelt not in submission, but in the respectful acknowledgement that one shows to forces greater than oneself. Then he lifted his lyre and began to play. The song he chose was not one of his more elaborate compositions, but rather something simple and true. It spoke of two souls finding each other across the vastness of existence, of love that transformed both the lover and the beloved. It told of promises made under starlight, of shared dreams and quiet moments of perfect understanding. As the melody filled the throne room, something unprecedented began to happen. The Furies, those ancient embodiments of vengeance and punishment, began to weep tears that fell like drops of silver fire. The judges of the dead, who had rendered countless verdicts with perfect impartiality, found their stern faces softening with unexpected emotion. But it was the effect on the royal couple that proved most remarkable. Persephone, who understood better than anyone the pain of separation from loved ones, felt her heart breaking for the young musician's loss. Even Hades, lord of the dead and master of the final ending, found himself moved by the raw honesty of Orpheus's grief. When the song ended, the silence that followed was not empty, but full, pregnant with possibility and the weight of momentous decision. Orpheus lifted his eyes to meet those of the divine rulers and spoke words that came straight from his broken heart. "Great Lord Hades, mighty Queen Persephone," he began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to request. "I have come to ask for something that has never been granted. I seek the return of my beloved Eurydice, taken from me on our wedding night by cruel mischance." He paused, gathering his courage for the most important words he would ever speak. "I do not ask this as a right or a reward, but as a plea from one who has learned that love is the only force in any realm that gives existence true meaning. Without her, I am merely a hollow shell producing empty sounds. With her, I am capable of creating music that moves even the powers of death to tears." Hades leaned forward on his throne, his dark eyes studying the young mortal with genuine interest. "You ask for the impossible, musician," he said, his voice like the sound of wind through deep caverns. "The laws that govern death and life are not mere customs to be set aside on whim. They are the very foundations upon which all existence rests." But Persephone placed a gentle hand on her husband's arm and spoke for the first time. "My lord," she said, her voice carrying the music of spring rainfall and new growth, "perhaps there are laws higher than even those we enforce. This young man's love has accomplished what force never could. He has made the kingdom of death remember what it means to be alive." The king and queen of the underworld exchanged a look that spoke of the deep understanding that comes from sharing power and purpose for eons. In that silent communication, they weighed the precedent they would set against the undeniable power of what they had witnessed. Finally, Hades spoke, his decision carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Orpheus, your music has done what no force of arms, no cunning strategy, no divine intervention has ever accomplished. You have made the realm of death itself weep for the beauty of life and love." He paused, and in that pause, the fate of two souls hung in the balance. "I will grant your request, but such a gift cannot come without conditions. The natural order demands its due, even as love demands its victory." Persephone leaned forward, her eyes filled with compassion, but also with the wisdom that comes from understanding the delicate balance between mercy and justice. "Eurydice will be restored to you and may return to the world of the living. But you must lead her out of our realm, and during the entire journey, you must not look back at her. Not once. Not until you both stand again in the full light of the sun." The condition seemed simple enough, almost too easy after the impossible task of reaching this point. But Hades was not finished. "Understand this clearly, young musician. If you turn to look at her even once before you reach the surface world, she will be lost to you forever. No second chances, no appeals, no return journeys. This is the only opportunity you will ever have. Orpheus felt his heart leap with joy and terror in equal measure. The love of his life would be returned to him, but the journey ahead would test his faith and trust in ways he could barely imagine. "I accept your terms, great lord and lady," he said, his voice firm despite the enormity of what lay before him. "My love for Eurydice is stronger than my need to see her. I will trust in what cannot be seen." A gesture from Persephone brought forth attendants who disappeared into the depths of the palace. Within moments that seemed like hours, they returned, and with them came a figure that made Orpheus's heart nearly stop with recognition and relief. Eurydice walked toward him, but she was changed. Her form was translucent, shimmering like moonlight on water, and her movements carried the fluid grace of something not quite bound by earthly laws. Yet her eyes, when they met his, held all the love and recognition he remembered, all the warmth that had made his world complete. "My beloved," she said, her voice like a whisper carried on wind. "You came for me. You actually came for me." The wonder in her tone spoke of the amazement that even in death, even in the realm where hope traditionally dies, love had proven stronger than the ultimate separation. The journey back through the underworld began in silence, with Orpheus leading and Eurydice following behind him. Every step was an act of faith, every moment a test of the trust that true love requires. Orpheus could hear her footsteps behind him, soft as whispers, real as hope. But he dared not turn to confirm what his ears told him. They passed again through the realm of spirits, who parted before them like a gentle tide. The dead souls they encountered seemed to draw comfort from witnessing this unprecedented act of love and faith. Some reached out as if to touch Eurydice as she passed, but their ghostly fingers found only air, for she existed now in a state between life and death that even they could not fully comprehend. Past the sleeping form of Cerberus they walked, the great hound's 3 heads still resting peacefully, lost in dreams perhaps filled with the gentle music that had soothed his savage nature. Charon waited at the riverbank, his ancient boat ready to carry them back across the Styx. The ferryman's eyes followed Eurydice with wonder, for in all his endless years, he had never carried a soul in the direction from death toward life. The crossing seemed to take forever, and no time at all. Orpheus sat facing forward, his hands gripping his lyre so tightly that his knuckles showed white, fighting every instinct that urged him to turn and look at his beloved. Behind him he could hear the soft rustle of her otherworldly garments, the gentle rhythm of her breathing that was not quite breathing. "My love," Eurydice's voice drifted to him across the water. "I can feel myself growing more solid with each stroke of the oars. The warmth is returning to my limbs, and I can feel my heart beginning to beat again. We are going to make it. We are going to be together again." Her words filled Orpheus with such joy that it was almost physically painful. To know that she was truly there, truly returning to life, and yet not be able to see the miracle with his own eyes, was a torment unlike anything he had ever experienced. But love had brought them this far, and love would carry them the rest of the way. On the far shore, they began the long climb back toward the world of the living. The path wound upward through caverns and tunnels, growing lighter with each step as they approached the surface world. Orpheus could see far ahead a tiny circle of genuine sunlight that marked the entrance to the cave that led back to the realm of mortals. With each step toward that distant light, Eurydice's presence behind him seemed to grow stronger and more real. He could hear her voice gaining substance, her footsteps becoming more solid, her breathing deepening as life flowed back into her restored form. The miracle was happening exactly as the gods had promised, but still he dared not look. The circle of light grew larger and brighter as they climbed. Soon, Orpheus could feel the warmth of genuine sunshine on his face, could smell the sweet scent of flowers and growing things that marked the world where love and life flourished together. Just a few more steps, and they would both stand in the full light of day, free to look at each other, free to touch, free to begin their life together anew. But it was then, when success seemed certain, that doubt crept into Orpheus's heart for the first time. What if the gods had been playing a cruel trick? What if there was no one behind him, and he had been following nothing but echoes and wishful thinking? What if he stepped into the sunlight alone, having lost her forever because he had been too trusting, too naive? The doubt grew with each step, fed by the terrible silence that seemed to have fallen behind him. He could no longer hear her footsteps, no longer sense her presence. Had something gone wrong? Had she fallen behind? Was she in trouble and unable to call out for help? Just steps away from the entrance to the cave, with sunlight streaming around them and freedom within reach, Orpheus's faith finally cracked. The love that had carried him through every impossible trial now betrayed him, for love cannot exist without trust, and trust requires the ability to believe in what cannot be seen. He turned. For one brief shining moment he saw her. Eurydice stood just behind him, solid and real and beautiful, her eyes wide with joy and the promise of their life together. Her hand was reaching toward him, her lips forming words of love and triumph. But even as their eyes met, she began to fade. The look of joy on her face transformed into one of infinite sadness, not anger or blame, but the profound sorrow of understanding what had been lost. "My beloved," she whispered as her form grew translucent. "Goodbye." She was gone. The tunnel behind him was empty, filled only with echoes and the devastating knowledge of what his moment of doubt had cost them both. Orpheus emerged into the sunlight alone, carrying with him a grief deeper than death itself. But in the years that followed, as he wandered the world playing music that spoke of love's eternal nature, he came to understand a profound truth. Love is not about possession or even presence. Love is about the change it creates in the soul, the way it expands our capacity for beauty and meaning and connection to all of existence. Eurydice was gone, but the love they had shared lived on in every note he played, in every heart his music touched, in every soul that heard his songs and remembered what it meant to love completely. In this way, their love became immortal, a gift to all who came after them, a reminder that some things are indeed stronger than death itself. And so the story ends not with reunion, but with understanding. True love leaves its mark on the world, changing everything it touches, living on long after the lovers themselves have passed into memory and myth. In the music of Orpheus, in the tale of their journey, Eurydice lives still, and their love continues to inspire all who believe that beauty and devotion can indeed move mountains, charm wild beasts, and make even the kingdom of death weep for the glory of what it means to truly love another soul. I hope this eternal tale of Orpheus and Eurydice has carried you into the realm where love transcends even death itself. May the divine music of their story guide you toward deep and restorative sleep. If you've enjoyed this journey through ancient mythology, I invite you to subscribe to discover other tales that will soothe your nights to come. You can now let this video continue playing in the background. The relaxing music that follows will help you drift into even deeper slumber. Settle in comfortably and allow your body to surrender completely. Just as Orpheus's lyre could calm the wildest beasts, this gentle melody will watch over your peaceful rest.